Representative Carpenter.
I've got notes all over my desk. I want to start with something, Madam Speaker, and need to clarify something. I've heard it a number of times, and it just has dawned on me that this needs to be addressed before we vote. The provision within the Fiscal Policy Working Group recommendations that was referenced earlier by verbatim, and then I've heard others talk about the concept of can't address this because it doesn't have all the other components with it, right? The verbiage from the Fiscal Policy Working Group recommendations, again, was specifically directed towards the members of the working group. Positions for each member on any single provision should not be understood as an agreement with the context of a comprehensive solution, meaning the members did not want other members to be cherry picking a particular thing out of the group and saying this is what we all agreed upon. Only that the members agreed that all of these things needed to be what was addressed. It was never meant to indicate the legislature had to put all of these pieces together and all vote on them on the same time. That was never the agreement. The agreement was we needed a comprehensive solution, and there are things listed out here. So I requested that this paragraph get put into that. Kind of feel like maybe I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, I'm in favor of a comprehensive solution. I have been since 2021. I have authored legislation, this resolution included, causing them to come forward for conversations. I believe in a comprehensive plan. But I also believe that this body has its idiosyncrasies. And being able to get multiple pieces of legislation through all at once is darn near impossible. So this is a start, and this is why I described it previously as being a hinge that forces us to have a conversation on other things. I'd like to point out that in the conversations today, no one said that the PFD isn't in jeopardy of going away. I didn't hear that. I think there's a recognition in this building that the trajectory is for the dividend to go away. There's a saying that easy rides die hard. Well, the votes to discharge our tax bills from committee indicate to me that there's a division, which I already knew, but there's a division on the need for an income or sales tax, and that's understandable. But our budget that we passed reflects a willingness to tax Alaskans through the PFD to pay for our government and our government growth. So the question becomes, as government continues to grow, as it does, as it will, as it should, and the PFD is eliminated because that's the source of revenue that we're going to continue to tax, it just naturally gets consumed because it's the only thing to go to. What then? Who pays then? There will have to be some sort of tax to pay for the government spending once the PFD is gone. Consuming the PFD seems to be the most likely course of action. And I would argue that is the current long-term fiscal plan that is in play. Many of us don't agree that eliminating the PFD is the right thing to do. But I also sense that there is an uneasiness or an unwillingness to take first steps. It's almost like doing nothing is better until we have an assurance of success or a confidence in outcomes. I look at the Fiscal Policy Working Group recommendations. HJR7 is meeting a couple of those. It is a plan. It's a component of a plan. We had a saying in the military about planning. The value or the benefit of the plan isn't the plan itself, it was in the planning. Because the plan never survives first contact with the enemy. The Fiscal Policy Working Group is a good plan, it's a good framework, but it's going to require flexibility to implement. We have to start somewhere. I've heard that this passage of HJR7 would require a specific size PFD. The resolution does not do that. The resolution does require us to decide to follow the statute. And in that decision that the people would make for us, we would then be required to address the current statute. I have every confidence that this body can find the will to change the statute if it means appropriating itself more money. I have every confidence that that's going to happen. We have for decades precedent set with the Alaskans regarding how the dividend was paid. And within the last decade, we have changed that, except that it is just a will of this body that has changed it. The statute still exists, we just choose to ignore it. And that I've heard multiple times from different districts. Obviously, it matters to people that this legislature continues to choose to ignore the statute instead of changing the statute. Well, HJR7 sat on the floor for weeks. I got the sideways comments. Well, what are you doing with that? Are you ever going to vote on it? What's going on? Well, multiple components of a fiscal plan have sat in our committees for weeks while HJR7 sat here lonely on the floor. There is no good argument that says HJR7 can't be passed today because we don't have other components of a fiscal plan. We do, we just haven't acted on them. You want assurance of success? There is none. There was none when this country was founded. Someone made a comment, I think it was the first speaker, about leaders needing to fix the problem. We had individuals within this legislature years ago participate in a fiscal policy task force that looked at fixing this problem. 2021, we averted a government shutdown on like the next to the very last day to get a fiscal policy working group to meet that summer. And we have the recommendations now. You know, a favorite author of mine is John Maxwell, and he said, if you think you're leading but you turn around and you're alone, then you're just out for a walk. I think there are people in this body that have been leading. There just haven't been enough people surrounding them to make things happen. Leaders are often alone. It's lonely. But they're not really on their own if they've got people to support them. And this body, I've heard multiple iterations here of speaking that we need to do something, we need to do something. Well, doggone it. You don't have much criticism about what's in the bill or in the resolution. You're just, frustrated there aren't other things in it. What it does do is something very simple. It just says, we're going to follow the law. And it starts the conversation and forces us to take action. If we can't take that first step now, When would we ever? We've had plenty of time to bring all the components together, and yet we haven't. I want to finish by talking about opportunity cost. And there was a couple other folks here that talked about this in a similar sense. We've got a volatile revenue structure. Oil is volatile. Permanent fund earnings is a little less so, but it's still volatile. And the smallest amount of revenue coming into the state is on our taxes and others section. Fish taxes, road taxes, corporate income taxes. But the target for those taxes remains our business, our industry. Well, if we want economic growth, we got to take that target off. We got to take a first step to doing that. What is the opportunity cost for not doing it? Very hard for us to look at the calendar backwards and say, well, you know what? Because we've been doing making the decisions that we've been doing, here is all of the business that didn't happen. We can point and say our actions did this, but it's hard to say our actions didn't do this. So the opportunity cost for continuing to point to industry and business as the source of our body's preferred taxing method is a kind of a wet blanket on business growth. We need to have some structural reform in the way we do our revenues and spending. State Chamber, speaking of opportunities, State Chamber, since I've been in this legislature and probably before, has been saying that we need to have a spending cap, an effective spending cap. We got 2 of them, they're not effective. Spending cap an effective spending limit happens to be one of the recommendations from the Fiscal Policy Working Group. I noticed that it wasn't one of the bills that we tried to pull out of committee today. I'm confident that we're going to figure out where our revenue comes from. I'm not so confident that we're going to be able to hold our spending down. Thus, my belief that the PFD is in serious jeopardy. There is an opportunity cost for doing nothing today. The opportunity for doing something today with HJR7 is taking a step, even if we are not confident in what is going to happen. We can be confident in this body that we're going to make the best decisions that we can and move us into a better position than we are currently. There are enough people in this room that see that the permanent fund dividend is going away. And if we do not take action today, that inaction will eventually allow the permanent fund dividend to go away. When I came to the legislature, it was a statutory dividend. That was the conversation. We need to fight over it. We're going to get a statutory dividend. And then it turned to well, we're going to do 50% of the market value, 50-50 split. Bills now are at 25-75. Madam Speaker, the budget we passed, if we're just looking at the permanent fund earnings that we use to pay for the dividend and not the other dollar figures from previous year's budgets and waterfalls, and if you couple that with the spending increases that we demanded but didn't pass, we're looking at the desire, I shall say, to have a 13-87 split of the dividend. 13% of the permanent fund earnings, if we had passed what we wanted to spend on over the last couple days, 13% of the dividend would go, or permanent fund earnings would go to the dividend. This is the first step. Thank you, Madam Speaker.